Patricia Polacco. She's a lady who writes from her heart and gives us gifts of the heart. That's coming up next on Books Alive. Thank you so much for joining us today on Books Alive. I am absolutely thrilled, as I always am, except for this is a really, really special lady. In fact, this is a super person. She is the author of how many picture books?
About 90.
90?
Yeah.
About 90, yeah. Okay. And her name is Patricia Polacco. We are absolutely thrilled to have her here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Now, this lovely lady has been doing school visits all day long, and she still has all kinds of energy and excitement flowing right out of her. She is one of America's most beloved illustrators and authors, and we are going to have the joy of taking a look at a lot of the work that she has written and illustrated, and find out a little bit about her story. So, how about we start with, why do you do this for a living?
Well, I didn't start till I was 41. And when I announce this to children, you can see their faces drop because they figure, oh my heavens, she is very close to death. And then I tell them, you know, not only that, I've been writing for almost 28 years, and then they're counting on their fingers, and they're going to tell me how old I am.
Yes.
If you had known me as a child, we'll go way back in time. If I had been invited to your house to a birthday party when we were little, my family was poor. We couldn't afford to buy you anything. So when I was little, I would have done what I called a fat card for you. And what it was would be a wordless book where I would draw you. You would recognize yourself because, you know, in art I was very good even as a child. And then I would sew the edge of it, bind it, cover it with material, and it was actually a little book. And some of my friends still have these after all these years. But as far as considering that this is something I was going to do for a living, not particularly. Now, I'm learning disabled. I have dyslexia, dysnumeria, dysgraphia, and failure of sensory integration. So school and academics were rather difficult. The writing, of course, wasn't there because that was difficult to do. I couldn't read till I was 14.
Patricia, what is it like to be dyslexic? What do the words look like on the page?
It's, in my case, they move in and out of my field of vision this way.
Okay.
This is why looking at the works of M.C. Escher helped me more than anything.
Why?
Well, because he morphs positive and negative space.
Okay.
If you look at an exit sign, most people see the red letters. I identify the word by the pattern that is around the letters.
Okay, okay.
And M.C. Escher, he's a master of this, and he's a master of tessellation too. But just that helped me understand the concept of how I was identifying. At any rate, I actually studied art formally because when one side of the brain shuts down, the other side goes into hyperdrive. And they say when the academic side is not firing, then the artistic side goes crazy.
Wow.
And at 4, I could have walked into your house and done a floor plan.
Oh my goodness.
Still can, with elevations, because I understood congruency of 3 dimension. But I couldn't add, couldn't subtract, couldn't do the things you can do. Well, eventually I caught on in a school thanks to art teachers and drama teachers and all of the you know, the wondrous sides of academia that the No Child Left Behind, mind you, is cutting out of most of our public schools. So art was how I identified myself. It's what I had to hang my hat on. And literally eventually studied it formally at university. I ended up restoring antiquities for museums. That's what I used to do before I started writing.
Wow.
And I was a mother. I had children. But at 41, here was the turning point of my life. And I used to make, you know, birthday cards for friends. They always got a hand-drawn something for me. But at 41, my son Stephen was diagnosed with insulin-dependent diabetes. We were sent home from the hospital with 2 shopping bags full of material for him to read.
Wow.
And I thought, well, he's a little boy.
Yeah.
So the first professional book, if you want to call it that, was a wordless book for him, showing him how to take care of himself. Kaiser Permanente ended up buying that book.
My goodness.
And then Thatcher Hurd is a very old friend, and Thatcher's father is Clement C. Hurd, and he and Margaret Wise Brown did Goodnight Moon.
Oh my goodness.
So Thatcher is also an author and illustrator, and he says, why don't you come along to meetings of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators? So I started going along to meetings, and this is when I lived in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And the members of our organization were Kevin Henkes, Alan Say, Ruth Heller, Shirley Climo, I mean, these stellar authors.
Yes. Was it a small organization?
It was a small group.
Yeah.
We would meet at each other's houses once a month. But anyway, this was all brought about by my son in a way. But 28 years ago then, my mother bankrolled a trip for me to go to New York, because by then I found out how books are formatted. Saw 16 publishers in 1 week and sold everything I had.
Did you have appointments, or did you go knocking on doors?
Oh yes, no, you need to make appointments because they won't see you otherwise. And I saw 16 editors, actually.
Wow. Wow.
And that was the beginning, and there's been no turning back.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that interesting?
So when you sit down in your studio and you go to create or a book, what does that mean to you? Do you feel like I'm going to give another gift to the world? I want to reach a child, or you just want to tell a story?
No, for me it's like giving birth. There is something inside of me that I just have to do, have to kind of get out into the sunlight and the air. And how I create, which is interesting because of my sensory integration issues, I rock in a rocking chair. And I see the story in my head almost like a movie. One sits there, then sit down at a typewriter, not a computer. I don't know how to use a computer. And I type it up as if I am describing a movie to you in a letter.
Wow.
Any kid, if they see a movie, can describe the movie to a friend. Well, in a way, that's what writing is like for me.
Okay.
I then send that manuscript to my editor. Patricia Lee Gouch is my editor.
Is she still your editor?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Okay.
I'm her only author now. She's retired. And she'll send it back to me covered with red marks. And those are called corrections. I love telling children this because they think we authors get it right the first time. Oh, I don't think so.
No.
So it goes back and forth, and we do a lot of our corrections on the phone. And then I do the dummy, which is the rough black and white drawings of the book, and then go to color finishes. And then Bob's your uncle. You've got a book.
Wow. How does it feel when they hand it to you?
It feels wonderful. I mean, this is about my art teacher, Violet Chu. And where this book is not quite accurate, as in Thank You, Mr. Falker, I was actually older than this. She was my first teacher when I was about 14.
Okay.
But to write at the age I really was, it would have had to have been a young adult novel.
Oh.
And since kids are being diagnosed with learning disabilities so much sooner, we deliberately made the age younger, but the essence of the story is true. She has since passed away with cancer, and but I just adored her. And I just went actually back to my 50th high school reunion because she ended up being my high school art teacher. And we honored her at that time. She's been gone a while, but everyone adored her. So, you know, when I can literally put them on a book and have my heart in there with them, and children who never knew her are going to know her name and get an idea of the essence of who she was. In a strange way, she lives on, doesn't she? And that makes me feel good.
Good.
It really does.
And every child deserves to have a Miss Chu. Somebody
Yes.
who really sees them from the inside, understands what's going on in their world inside, and gives them a way to work past
Absolutely.
that, you know? I mean, your books are so beloved because there's always something very authentic and true that just reaches into people's hearts and to their true self and just goes ping.
Well, thank you.
And it's just
Well, they're
awesome.
personal narratives. I mean, when I talk to children about writing, I advise them, keep the story very near your heart. Now, I do personal narratives. Not all stories are like that, but when they're coming from the heart, they kind of go out and do a cycle out there. But they always end up right back at the heart again. And what helps too with helping children to write is keep the focus very small. Here's an example. I was visiting a friend who was a teacher who had actually a special ed class, but she had assigned a paper to her class, and these were fifth graders. And they were doing it on their computers, and I was going from one desk to the other, kind of looking to see what some of the kids were doing. And one boy was sitting at his computer, and he was rolling his pencil between his thumb. And I went and did a program at the school, came back.
You still there?
Still doing this.
Okay.
By the end of the day,
Yes.
still doing this.
Yes.
Well, I had to go home, but I called Sandy in a few days, and I said, what did Jerome ever end up writing?
Yeah.
She said, Tricia, he wrote an 8-page essay on all of the peachy keen things he could do with his bright yellow pencil.
Oh.
So do you understand? The focus was tiny,
Yeah.
but he jumped off from there
Oh.
and just dove
Yeah.
everywhere
Yeah.
and said what he could do with
Wow.
it, which is brilliant.
Yes. Did you give him permission to do that somehow, or was that just who he
No,
was?
he thought it up.
That's where
I
he
thought,
came
wow.
from. Okay.
What I do sometimes when I go to schools and do seminars on writing is we'll put a long table out and put objects on a table like a pair of glasses or a shoe or a book or a vase and have the kids come by and list all the things they would do that with it other than what it is supposed to be used for.
Oh, wow.
Then go back to it and construct a story from all of these nonsensical things that they can do with it.
How fun.
It gives them a kind of jumping off point.
Yeah.
I think, when adults write, they'll ask me, I don't know how to start something. I'll say, write a letter to an unborn child.
Ooh.
Tell them what you want them to know.
Oh, my goodness.
And from there, you're going to find your focus and you'll hone in on stories of the family or what have you. But like I say, this is personal narratives. It's not necessarily fantasy or
right.
the other kind of, the other
Action-adventure or
genres there are.
something.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your family and personal narrative. I'm going to reach way over and get Keeping Quilt. Because I know. Did you have this quilt at the school today? Did I
Yes.
see it? Yes, I thought so.
Not that exact one. That one
Okay.
is now in a museum.
Oh, wow.
And 10 years ago, my sister-in-law made an exact copy of it.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's the one we've been using as the Keeping Quilt. So that I did. I took to
Okay.
the schools.
So if you haven't found this one, and you did a 10-year update to this, right?
It's just going to be coming out in the fall. That
Okay.
brings us all the way up to modern time.
Oh.
And the irony is I'm holding a baby on the last page. And my son and his wife just announced they've got a first baby
Oh,
coming.
my
So it
gosh.
was perfect.
Wow.
Perfect.
So you're gonna do it again.
I
Oh,
guess.
that's incredible. That's incredible.
And then I wrote a prequel to this that's coming out at the same time called The Blessing Cup. And it's about the pogroms and why the family left Russia to begin with.
What great history.
It's an amazing history.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, you had an incredibly rich family childhood connection. And if I remember correctly, it's Ukrainian Russian on one side and Irish on the other.
That's right.
So that's quite the blend.
Oh, you can say that again. So we had, you can imagine every religion, idea represented within our family. And what I was thankful to my family for, no one was ever allowed to draw a line in the sand and defy the other to step across.
Yeah.
Occasionally we would get into it over dietary law.
Oh.
And when it looked like it was going to get a little bit further, the
Yeah.
family would literally, slam their hands on the table and say,
Yeah.
listen,
Yeah.
we all serve the same God.
Ah.
There is no love in this conversation, so we're
Ah.
not going to have it.
Wow.
And that was it.
Wow. What a,
They were
what a
amazing.
lesson. That's
Yeah.
incredible. So these are, it began with the pieces of the dress and the babushka,
Mm-hmm.
and then they all came together and made the quilt, and then the quilt has been used throughout her family's ceremonies and traditions.
Mm-hmm. For everything. Mm-hmm.
For everything. And so it's like the quilt
Tablecloths,
binds.
picnic blankets, chuppahs for
Uh-huh.
for weddings or canopies. All the babies get held in it. When family members pass away, we put it over the top of their coffin. So it's literally something that follows us all the days of our lives.
And you're giving children who don't maybe have a sense of all of that, an idea or a picture into what it could look like.
Well, what they do with this is they'll jump off, and teachers are building lessons around finding an object within their home or their grandparents' home and building their family history around
Oh.
it. And these days with schools with such wonderful diversity,
Yes.
I've walked in and scanned the halls and seen stories called My Family. That's just exquisite.
Oh, how wonderful.
It is wonderful.
It's rich.
Because we all have history to be proud of. So, yeah.
All right, is Betty Doll? I think Betty Doll. Yes. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at Betty Doll for a minute, because this is a little bit different. You actually did write this.
That's
as a-
almost more for adults than it is for children.
Okay, that's I can see
Because some
that.
of my stories are that way.
Okay.
They're almost a little too heady for children. But the children will take one thing from it, but an adult is going to take something else. But this is a little doll that really existed that was on my mother's shelf in her bedroom. And my mother told me that that's a dolly that her mama made for her when their house burned down when she was little. And Betty Doll, within our family, we used her to comfort anyone for any particular reason. So I sat down and started drawing the story of my mother, and this was right after my mother's death, though, because when my mom died, I had packed up her house and I took Betty Doll to my home in Michigan. When I unwrapped the Betty Doll, and it took me a year to even look in those boxes, my mother had written a letter wrapped around her that she knew I would read after she passed away. And her letter is the basis of this book.
And it traces her life. It's like she gives herself back to you that way. It was really amazing. And I loved the comfort of the doll, just to have something that connected you like that.
Oh, I still have that little doll.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. Okay. Was this the first one?
That was the very first book.
Okay.
Yes.
Meteor.
And originally it was for Dodd Mead, a publishing company that no longer exists.
Okay.
But that was because our family, in a way, this is how it all started. A meteor actually did land in their front yard. That's now our family headstone. But this certainly, I added and embroidered, certainly. And when I go out to schools, I take a piece of that meteorite and invite children to make wishes on it.
Oh, is that the rock?
That's the rock,
Okay,
and the
okay.
wishes are qualified, though.
Okay.
They can't wish for money, they can't change other people with a wish, and they can't wish for possessions.
Okay.
And it's interesting to see then where they go with that,
Yeah.
because it's about what are you going to do for the world, not what's the world going to do for you.
Yeah.
But it's
Wonderful.
hysterically funny,
Yeah.
this thing.
Oh, it is. It's absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a rip snorter, and it reminds me of. Now you have a brother,
Oh my, yes,
and I
yes.
understand that he's still playing on the hockey team.
Yes,
I
he
heard you
is.
saying that
He's
today.
72 years old. Isn't that just astonishing?
That's great. And the name of the hockey team is?
The Old Poops Hockey Club.
There you go. Okay. You
In
heard it
Berkeley,
here
California.
first. Okay. So he's 72, he's still playing. All right, now she's got two here. There's my rotten, red-headed older brother with goats. And are these, do you draw the goats on your farm for these? Okay, so these are friends.
Yes.
All right, and this is Rotten Richie and the Ultimate Dare, and you got a nickname out of this one.
Slapshot.
Slapshot. All right, and he is Dance King.
He's Dance King.
Okay. All right.
My brother and I actually used to do dance contests because he also was a very fine dancer. And he worried about the fact that I didn't have any boys that cared about me. So one year he even taught me to do rock and roll dancing.
Wow.
Which is hysterical, but he did.
So are you a good dancer?
I used to be. I'm old and fat now, so, you know, it's not quite as easy as what I used to, but I love dancing.
Oh, that's great. All right, so he dares her to come in and play in the hockey game. So she turns around and says, I'll see you in the ballet recital.
Well, but this is what my mother made us do, because we argued and argued and argued over which was harder, ballet or hockey. So she got fed up and she made us change places temporarily. And where the book isn't true is, in actual fact, when I played on his team, I went out and high-sticked and slashed everybody and beat people up.
Whoa.
So I'd go in the penalty box.
Oh, right, that's right.
You're safe.
That's right.
There.
That's right.
Out on the ice.
Right.
Oh my land, these boys were body checking me and killing me. So I figured, well, I'll just hit them with a hockey stick and I get to sit in there.
And I'll sit over there.
And he, on the other hand, did very well in ballet. He executed a quadruple pirouette, which I've never been able to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So there's another thing he could do better.
Well, he could.
All right.
What can I say?
But you're better on the merry-go-round.
Yes, I suppose so.
Okay. All right. So you do write a lot that is family-centered, and it's beautifully rich, and it's wonderful. But you also go into the historical area. And I think Pink and Say's got to be one of your best-known, best-loved books. Let me grab that one right here. Okay. So this one actually has roots in your family, though.
This is my father's side.
Okay.
Say, the boy there on the right, is actually my great-great-grandfather. His name was Sheldon Russell Curtis.
Okay.
And he fought in the Civil War, ended up in Andersonville Prison in Georgia. And I never knew him, but I knew his daughter, who was my great-grandmother, Rosa Curtis Stowell.
Wow.
And then her daughter was my grandmother, and then my dad, and then me. But this is a story apparently he told his family because he felt awful that he lived through the Civil War and Pincus A. Lee didn't. And he felt Pincus A. Lee was so much braver than he was.
Wow.
And he apparently used to say to the family, somebody has got to remember him.
Oh.
So in a way, this was wonderful to be able to write it because this serves as a living memory for Pincus A. Lee, who died in Andersonville and was put in a common grave.
Wow.
So
wow.
He never lived to have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Sheldon Russell Curtis went home to have 7 children and 30 or 40 grandchildren and so on.
And you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, now I'm wondering if I know I have January Sparrow here. Let me get that out. That's, what is that, like maybe 3 years ago?
I would say it's a pretty ambitious project because it was very long.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted the company to make that into a chapter book. Because it would have, I think, gone better if teachers had a place to stop and then go on. But this is a true story of the Crosswhite family in Marshall, Michigan. The Crosswhites were slaves who crossed into Ohio, came up to Michigan, all the time running from the slave owners, and came to Marshall, Michigan, which is about maybe 12 miles from me. And after living there for 5 years, having a baby, they had a little girl, the owners eventually came to get them. And what was so amazing about this, the entire town of Marshall rioted and would not allow them to be taken. But out of that, the slave owners, you know, the Fugitive Slave Act was still in force. They had every right to come get them. So they then started a lawsuit in the state of Michigan. That's probably one of the most famous lawsuits, called the Crosswhite trial. So that's what this is about. It's not for small children. This is absolutely for older children who are interested in history. And it doesn't sugarcoat what slavery was like. It was awful. I mean, people were sold like cattle. They were beaten. They were tortured. And
here's January.
Yeah, that's January.
And
who
where's the
is
sparrow?
believed to be dead at the very beginning of the book. And you don't find out exactly.
And here's
He
the little
gives a sparrow to
Yeah.
this little person, and that sparrow is something she had all of her life.
So that's that poignant touch that you give us, that we can lift out of all that darkness that's in here. But this is another wrenching book. And I was really interested in the one that you did on Abraham Lincoln, Just in Time.
Oh, Just in Time.
Yeah.
Well, now that story came from,
Here it is.
there it is. I had two young men in my life, these little fellers, that were so absorbed in video games.
Yes.
And I said, you know, someday I would love to take you to Harper's Ferry, where you could see, you know, original photographs and everything about Abraham Lincoln. And so I took that then. In the story, I'm the grandmother taking two boys to Harper's Ferry. But it's a book about time travel. They put on these uniforms, which they wanted to do.
Yep.
They go through this mysterious door, and the next thing they know, they're in Harper's Ferry, but when Lincoln was coming to visit and have pictures taken.
Yes.
And they end up actually in the battlefields. And also these boys, as a lot of little boys are, were fascinated by battles. And in this book, it shows how horrible battlefields really are.
There's
And
one
that there's
two-page
nothing glamorous,
spread.
nothing glamorous about it.
There's not a word on there,
No.
but it certainly speaks. Oh my.
So at the end of, they're with a photographer, not Matthew Brady, but actually his assistant, who actually did do the photographs there.
Okay.
It's attributed to Matthew Brady, but he really wasn't there. At any rate, at the end of the book, I'll give this away, but the grandmother goes down to the lobby of the hotel, and they notice, this is after the boys have come home, that there's a photograph of Lincoln and the two boys are in it.
Yeah.
Because they were in the story.
That gives you the goosebumps. Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that must have been fun to birth that
Oh,
one.
it was.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what do you think of this? You were saying that they were all into the video games. You know, what do you think of the digital era? Are your books going to be e-books? And, you know, where are you with all of that?
They may be. I think children's books are not doing really making that transition. Because most children's books, especially with pictures, are a double spread. Well, you can't get a double spread on a Kindle.
Okay.
Even if you turn it sideways,
Okay.
the picture is going to be so small, you know, that you can't even see it and probably couldn't read it. So I know adult fiction has suffered a great deal from the electronic age.
Right.
I mean, I think there's room for electronic books. I just, you know, I don't know what to think. I worry a little that we're sacrificing something in our ability to create and be interactive with other human beings. Because they're finding now, when they give iPads to very small children, they have an outreach into the world, but they almost instantly disconnect from each other.
Right. Right.
And I think that connection we're going to lose if we don't watch
Right.
it.
Yeah. There's something important there.
I think it's wonderful. I don't mean to say that the electronics aren't.
Right.
But I think, why does it have to be either or?
Yes.
Why can't it be both?
Balance.
Yeah.
Exactly. Totally agree with
Yeah.
you. This lovely book, and sometimes when I talk about your books to people, this is one that they just instantly go, oh, she did that one on the Amish people, you know? So this is Just Plain Fancy. And the thing that I thought was really great about this was that you gave these children such a grown-up concept to try to figure out. And I think we do that to children a lot. And we expect them to understand it in our terms, and they can't. So in this case, it's shunning in the Amish community. And
the thing of it is, where I am, I'm very good friends with Old Church Amish in Michigan. A lot of them have picked up their entire Ordnung, actually came back to upstate New York. They're in Mount Morris, New York now, because they got in a disagreement with New Church that said they could put rubber on their wheels and they could have cell phones, and they said no.
Wow.
And I said to them, well, then why don't you just split off from the Ordnung and keep on worshiping? They said, because we can't do that. The bishop says we must leave.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to write about them sooner or later, because I've already gone over and photographed their feet and their hands. You cannot photograph their faces. And one of these days soon, maybe the entire story, you will never see their faces, because that's something you can't do.
Oh, that is amazing.
But they're quite different. These are Lancaster Amish, and the Amish where I am are a little different than this.
Okay.
But wonderful.
Are these from Pennsylvania? Okay. All right. So they've found an egg, and they're going to put it under, is it henny?
They put it under a hen,
and
it hatches out a bird unlike anything they have ever seen, which turns out to be a peacock. Well, since their lives are about being plain, they thought, oh dear, this animal, it's beautiful, and that's wrong in their estimation. But, the elder says, no, this is something God created, and the beauty of this animal, there's nothing wrong with this. So, but the girls try to hide this peacock for the longest time, and eventually it comes out. And
but to me, it was about, each one of those children we saw today at Pointers Run was a peacock, and they all get to shine and be their best, and you don't have to hide and all that kind of thing. So I thought that was wonderful. All right, I want to shift into some of my favorites, Junkyard Wonders.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Is it this one? Okay. You know them from the back. I only know them from the front.
Inside and out.
All right, so this is you. Autobiographical. How old were you when we were doing this?
Well, in actual fact, this was the year after Thank You, Mr. Falker. This was after I learned to read.
Let's start with that.
Thank You, Mr. Falker happened first.
All right.
In actual fact, I was almost 14. But we couldn't have the character that age, or the book wouldn't be a children's picture book. It would have to be young adult. So I made my character much younger, but the story and essence of it are exactly the same.
Okay, so you're about 10?
I would say in this.
Okay. All right.
And George Falker was my teacher, and I had failed so completely, just year after year after year. And he was the one who saw something that no one else saw. He kind of looked into my soul, and he saw that my art was something that I was really good at. So he would showcase it and hang my drawings up and make a big deal out of it. But he also, I think, realized I wasn't reading very well. Now, in my family, when we're 4, the entire family surrounds us, and they put a book in our hands, and they take honey and pour it on the cover of the book. And the family then asks the child to taste the honey. When we do, they ask, and what does this taste like? And the answer is, well, this is sweet. And then they say, yes, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee who made the honey. You're going to have to chase it through the pages of a book. So for me, this was promise of what was to come. Except I know when I was in first grade, I was in Miss Bice's first grade in Fremont Elementary School in Battle Creek. And all of us were in the Green Circles reading club. And after a while, some kids went to the yellow circles, some were in the blue, some were in the red. I stayed a green circle all year. So at this age, realized there's something very wrong with me. And struggled in the school all those years. Got all the way up to Mr. Falker's class, because his real name is Falker, not Falker. And when he came to be in my life, I started believing that I could, you know, this doesn't have to be always how it is. On the other hand, I didn't want him to know that I was dumb and stupid, because at that age I thought I was. And one day he asked me to stay after school and help wash blackboards. Kids won't know what a blackboard is. They have smart boards now, but in the old days they were kind of a black slate board and used white chalk, and it would get all dusty and white and you'd have to wash it at the end of the day. Then when they went into modern blackboards, they were green with yellow chalk. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Well, at any rate, he asked me to stay after school and help wash blackboards. But what he was actually asking me to stay there for was to test and see what letters and numbers looked like when I drew them with a big wet sponge on the board. And I remember the moment that he realized. I wanted to drop it and run, because I thought, oh no, here's the one I wanted to love me more than anything. And if he knew I was dumb, he wouldn't like me. And he sank to a knee next to me and said, "Oh, Patricia, you've been suffering all these years." And he says, "Sweetie, you have something that has a name. And do you know there's other people like you, and you're not alone." And out of his own pocket, he paid for Ruth Plessy to come work with me. And we did balance boards, colored acetates. I can't tell you what actually worked, but I remembered the aha day when she gave me something to read. And when I looked at it, I got a mental image, opened my mouth, and the same thing came out of my mouth that was on the page. Elementary for you. For me, I had just climbed Mount Everest.
Gosh.
And I remember just being so startled, and then I read another sentence and another. That very day, ran all the way home. And my mother was a teacher. She didn't know I was in this kind of trouble. And ran into the kitchen, I remember, and got a jar of honey out of the cupboard and went to her bookshelf, grabbed a book, poured the honey, and tasted it, because I knew my life had changed. So he pulled me out of absolute darkness. And I believe teachers do this every single day. And here's the sad part. We don't get back to thank them. And it's teachers' fault, because they put us on the threshold, and they literally, from the back of us, give us a push and say, "Now fly. I've given you the wind. Now you fly." And we do. We make this broad arc and go on out into the world. Sometimes, though, we turn and we come back. In his case, I saw him 30 years later at a wedding. And I remember walking up to him and grabbing him by his lapels. At that time, he must have been in his 70s. And I said, "Mr. Falker, you probably don't remember me, but you saved my life, and I just want to thank you." And we sat down and talked and talked and talked. And that was the high point of my life, to see him again. But Junkyard Wonders, actually, after I learned to read that year, my parents were divorced, and they shared custody, and we'd spend the summers with my dad in Michigan, school year with my mother in California. So I went for the summer at my dad's, and then I thought, you know, why don't I stay and go to school here for a year? Because if I go back to California, they're going to know I'm dumb, even though I can read now, but I'm going to be put in special classes, and I don't want that to happen. Never dreaming, of course, that they would send my manuscripts from California to Michigan. But they got, my parents agreed, okay, a year. And I went to Williamston School, was so thrilled to be there. And of course, when they sent the manuscripts, I was put in a special class. And Mrs. Peterson was my teacher. And in those days, when you were in a special class, you were in with physically disabled as well as mentally challenged, or people with some difficulty or another. And the entire school called us the junkyard because we were broken, and that experience that year with her taught me the wonder of being different, and that there's absolutely not only nothing wrong with it, it's something that later you celebrate in your life, because all of those kids went on to be extraordinary people, all of them.
Yeah, I love the story at the end. Now, I want to mention that there is a fantastic definition of genius here.
Isn't it?
It is. Now, was that...
She wrote that
She
on
did,
the board,
okay,
and she
okay.
made us copy that down.
Okay.
And I've had it all of my life, because genius isn't quite what you think it is.
Right.
Genius is exactly what that definition is. It's, you know, it's just an amazing definition.
It is.
So it's worth buying that book just to have that definition.
It is. It's really wonderful. And I'm not going to read it out loud because I want you guys to either come to the library and get it or go buy the book.
Absolutely.
Now, this group of exceptional children goes to the junkyard. They all get their piece of junk, and
Well,
she
this is
teaches
because she
them.
said, you know, we were saying how everybody was calling us junkyard, and she said, well, what do you think's wrong with a junkyard? And we said, well, it's where throwaway things are. And she says, oh, no. We're going to go to the junkyard, and we're going to assemble something from what other people consider to be junk. But you're going to make something extraordinary that nobody's ever seen before. So she did do that. And here's another thing she did that was very clever. To break us into work groups, she did not pick who's going to be with whom, because kids kind of resent that, and they feel like they're being put with certain people for reasons that are ulterior motives. She came in one day with little vials, glass vials full of a liquid. Now, she knew who she was giving those vials to. And she said, I want you to take the top off and put it on your nose, put it on your wrist, and smell. Some kids smelled like lemon, some of them smelled like cinnamon, some of them smelled like, you know, any odor that you can imagine. But she said, all right, now go sniff each other's wrists. Whoever smells like you is going to now be in your tribe for the rest of the year. And that's how she broke us into groups. So we felt like we discovered each other, when in fact she was picking who we were going to be with.
Genius.
Well, she was, wasn't she?
Yes, and how wonderful she went into teaching.
Yep.
All right, so you guys had a project and you overcame a lot.
We built an airplane.
Yes.
That's what a model plane.
Yes, and flew it to the moon.
It flew to the moon.
And
we'll believe that as long as we live.
And then, when you went down, was it Gibby that you went
Gibby
and saw
went on
in
to become
Houston?
a NASA engineer, and he had Tourette's syndrome.
Yes.
And Gibby, he died of cancer, but I saw him shortly before he died. And his father took photographs of all of us on the roof that day when we launched this airplane. And Gibby had a microchip of that photograph. He designed the LEMs for Apollo.
Wow.
And he put one in the struts, and it landed on the moon, and he said, we made it to the moon.
So your picture went to the moon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys did.
Isn't that something? We're in the sea of tranquility somewhere.
I love that.
Well, but that's the point. I mean, all of those kids. Tom Schoaf went on to become artistic director of the American Theater Ballet in New York, and Ravon Sauls became a great designer. And, you know, these people all went to do things that were unusual.
The junkyard.
We were the junkyard.
Yes. I cannot thank you enough for coming to sit
pleasure.
down and share yourself with us today. You share so much of yourself through your books. And I'm sure if you haven't found her books yet, you get the idea of they're funny, they're poignant, they reach into you, they are really in a class by themselves, and we're so lucky that she's still writing. Now, Penguin actually sent me...
Oh, those are the F and G's. I haven't seen that
Oh, well,
yet.
I'll let you look at it.
Give me that.
Gifts of the heart.
This is a new Christmas story.
Yes.
And it's about this lady who was she came to be our housekeeper because my grandmother, the last year we were on that farm, passed away. But this woman is mysterious. You'll love the story. I'm not sure that she wasn't completely magical.
Wow.
Her name was Calamity.
Yes.
Calamity.
Calamity.
And she was something.
Yep.
And that's...
And that's straight from the lady who wrote it herself. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys can always hop on abookandahug.com. We've got all of her books on there. And give every child in your life a book and a hug. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.